Hi there, my name is Pat Fader, and thanks for taking the time to watch this screencast. It's going to be on roaming profiles. So I'm going to run through and talk about roaming profiles. I'm going to set one up, several up actually, using PowerShell, but I'll also jump to the GUI and kind of show you what's going on there as well. So by the end, my goal would be that you would know how to set up a roaming profile through the GUI and through PowerShell. So with that, let's get started real quickly. What is a roaming profile? First things first, right? So when I log on to this domain controller here, I've only logged on as the administrator so far. So my administrator has a user profile that's stored locally in the C drive, and my user's profile, consists of the stuff that's on my desktop. I've got one file on there, um, my documents folder, my downloads, etc. And there's actually some hidden files in this administrator's profile as well, which would contain some of the registry settings. So you could think of it as the user's profile contains the information that is unique to this user when he or she logs onto the system. There are occasions that you'd want a local user profile to be copied up to a file server somewhere so that we could follow a user around, for example. So when I log onto my Windows 10 machine in my office, or when I log onto it on the shop floor, the contents of my desktop, my documents, my downloads, all that content is synchronized or downloaded or I guess when you log off, it would be uploaded to a file server, and then when you log on, it would be downloaded to a file server. And it sounds like a great idea. You're like, oh, it's fantastic. My profile follows me wherever I go. But it just depends. I mean, if you're like me, and I've got like on my Mac desktop about 40 gigabytes worth of virtual machines. If I converted my Mac, to somehow use a roaming profile, that would be hideous. So when I move between systems, and I have to then wait for 40 gigabytes of desktop content to be downloaded to the next system, that would be kind of a nightmare. So roaming profiles have their place. There are some scenarios where they make sense, but I just wanted to, at least for now, run through and show you how to set them up. And if you want to Google this on your own, a great alternative to roaming profiles is folder redirection, and that's something that's going to be used more prevalently in industry. So that might be something you want to read up on. But anyways, for now, let's talk about roaming profiles. And I have to admit, I'm kind of bummed out. This is my second time through it. My awesome Snagit software let me down and recorded no audio the last time, so I'm a bit nervous here. All right. So I am currently logged into a domain controller, and this is the same domain controller that you use for ITnet 112, 111, for ITnet 159 or PowerShell class. So this is just a domain controller. And what I'm going to do first is just create an organizational unit called temp employees. And the next line 3 could actually return all of the OUs in my system. So the last one I created was temp employees. There it is. One of the things in PowerShell, if you look, like each one of my organizational units had a whole bunch of properties associated with it, like, let's see here. City, the country, the distinguished name, the link group policy objects, the name, the object class, the GUID, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of information associated with each of those organizational units. If you want to in PowerShell, you can kind of limit what's being displayed. So with this select object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of my organizational units that are returned from the first half of the command here. I'm going to pipe that into select object and just say, you know what? I only want you to retain the name and distinguished name. The distinguished name is right here, and the name is down there. So when I run this, it's a little cleaner look or view of what we have as far as OUs go in our environment. I could also, say the heck with PowerShell, right? And I could just go to Server Manager, and I could go to Active Directory, Users, and Computers, and I could either view my OUs here or create them. So there's my temp employees OU that we just created in PowerShell. All right, let's make 20 users for this demo. So lines 7 through 15 are going to create 20 users. There they go. So if we jump back to Active Directory, Users, and Computers, let's see if I can do a refresh. There they are. So I've created 20 users. If I wanted to look at this, I don't want to go through line by line, but the first half of line, so basically lines 7 through 15 I'll get executed one time. Line 7, the first half of line 7 counts from 1 to 20, so 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then for each one of those numbers, like for the number 1, this for each command says for that number 1, I want you to do everything in here. So this is going to make one user account. And then for the number 2, it'll make another user account. And this little chunk here, $_ is actually the number 1, the number 2, the number 3. So the first time through it makes employee 1, then employee 2, then employee 3, and the last user is employee 20. There's one command that creates our user account, and that's kind of spread across lines 9 through 14. And it's hard to see, but there's this little backtick. I just highlighted it right there. It's kind of next to your escape key on your keyboard, and that tells PowerShell it's not over yet. The command started on line 9, it goes to line 10. There's another backtick, and some of the things that we're specifying is, we're making a new Active Directory user. I'm specifying the password to be password01. I had to kind of jump through some hoops because Microsoft or PowerShell doesn't like it when you when you display passwords in clear text. Let's see here. I'm specifying a username of employee 1 the first time through. I'm enabling the user account. I'm telling PowerShell where to put that user account. It's sticking it in the temp employees OU. I'm assigning a SAM account name to it, as well as a user principal name. So anyways, after running all that, if we go and take a look at my, one of my employees, I've got the SAM account name specified. I have the username and the user principal name identified. So the account is not disabled. All that information I could have done through the GUI here, but we just did it in PowerShell. So there you go, 20 users made. Alrighty, so I am, I guess I could use PowerShell to display all my Active Directory users as well. It's amazing, right? I could even use PowerShell to count them for me. There, got 20 of them. Let's see here. I'm going to make a new, line 21, let's make a new global group called roaming employees. So that's, it's a global security group. We could take a look at that in Active Directory users and computers. And let's see here, roaming. Here it is. It is a global group, a global security group, and it's called roaming employees. It could have been a domain local group as well, but global group is fine for this. And okay, line 23 is, I'm sure you could figure that out. Show me all the groups. A lot of groups on a domain controller. A lot more on one of our domain controllers at MATC, probably hundreds. I'm going to, in lines 26 and 27, I'm just taking all of the users that are in my employees OU. I just found this online, and I'm going to add them to my roaming employees global group. So I've got a bunch of users in an OU, and I want to add those to a specific global group. So I'm doing that here. Done. There's lines 26 and 27 should actually technically all be in the same line, but I just, if you have a commandlet or a string of commands with a bunch of pipes in between them, you can basically start a new line and just, PowerShell knows enough that if a command ends in a pipe, it knows that it continues to the next line. So, at 26 and 27, what does it do? The first half of line 26 just returns all of the Active Directory, all of the users in my temp employees OU, that's all 20 of them. And then I take each one of those user objects, employee 1, employee 2, employee 3, and for each one of those I execute this command which says add, well, you can read it, but add the user object to the roaming employees global group. So add Active Directory group member, what group, the roaming employees global group, and add that user object to it. So there it is. I can't remember if I ran it, so let's just do it again. Okay, I could prove to myself that that works. We could just go to Active Directory users and computers here, and we could take a look at that roaming employees global group, members, employees 1 through 20. Okay, good. It's time, now that we've got our user accounts created, it's time to set up a shared folder for our roaming profile. So on our file server, I am going to, on line 30, make a new directory called profiles on the C drive. On line 31, I am going to share it, and the share name will be called profiles. And on line 32, I am going to assign the roaming employees group full control. So if we take a look at that real quickly, let's go to our C drive and let's go to profiles, and let's just look at the sharing properties. Sharing. So it is shared as profiles, and if I look at the permissions, we see that roaming profiles, roaming employees have full control. Now what I probably could do is get rid of this everyone group. I don't need that. So pretty much I'm only allowing people that are going to have roaming profiles, give them access to this shared folder. All right, that's done. Oh, you know, this is what I should also do. I could have set the NTFS permissions in PowerShell, but sometimes it's very doable. It's just a little, I think it's a little more, gets a little confusing. So let's just do it via NTFS. So if I look at the NTFS, recall that that users, when they access a shared resource, need both the share permission and the NTFS permission to get access. And what I'm going to do is, this is the default set of permissions that are being inherited from the C drive. I'm going to disable inheritance here, and I'm going to say just, let's start with those permissions. So convert all the inherited permissions into explicit ones. Okay. So now that when I click on these different access control entries, the check marks are black as opposed to being like a light gray, so I can edit these. And what I'm going to do is actually remove the users group. Let's remove the users group. Let's add our roaming global group that we created. And that roaming global group, they're going to need to be able to read as well as write this shared folder. And I can do one more thing here. We can get kind of tricky. If I'm looking at the roaming employees access permissions or whatever, what I can do is I can say, you know what, these roaming employees really only need to have access to this one folder. So they can read and write just in this folder. And what's going to happen is if you write something to it, you become the creator owner of that object, and then as the creator owner, you'd have full control. So this isn't, I could probably make this a little more secure. What I don't like about this is a user could create a subfolder on this directory, and then they could upload like all their home videos to it because but they think, oh look, I found the server sitting out here at work, and let me just back up my 2 terabytes worth of family videos and pictures there. But anyways, this will work for our demo at least. So NTFS permissions have been set. We're almost done. So now what we're going to do is start configuring our users to use a roaming profile. So line 35, actually, when I run it, it's going to set the employee one's profile path property to server 2016-1/profile/%username%. What does that mean? Well, basically it's saying there's a profile path property out there, and there's a profile path property with a user account, and that user's profile is going to be stored on my file server 2016-1. It's going to be stored in the profiles subfolder in there, and then let's just take a look at it. All right. So let's see here. Let's go to my temp employees, employee 1. So here we go. So the profile path is set to server 2016-1/profiles, and then what this username% means is take the user's username and replace it where you see %username%. It's almost like a variable. So if my username is Pat, the profile path is server 2016-1/profile/Pat. If my username is FaderP, it'll be server 2016-1/profile/FaderP. So okay. So we can test it now. Let's go to our Windows 10 client. And I am going to log on as employee 1 here, not as administrator. I apologize for the small font. I can fix that in a second. I have like a Retina display on this laptop, so it's some crazy high resolution. So Windows default is like everything is crazy small until you scale it up. So employee 1, so I'm logging on as employee 1. I'm still logging on to ITNet 112. You have to be careful. Like if I'm logging on as administrator, as an example, administrator, the default is log on to the client. So I don't want to log in locally most of the time, so I might need to specify my domain. But since the user account employee 1 only exists in my domain, so the client is smart enough to just to say you're logging into your domain. And my password is password01. This is where you see if your permissions are correct. If I had a permission issue, I wouldn't get this far. I'd get an error message. Let's go back. While this is starting up, let's go back to our domain controller. And let's look at our shared folder on there. So if I go to the C drive, if I go to profiles, well, there it is, employee1.v6. So I can't actually think, oh, I'm an administrator and I want to look what's in there in this person's profile. I can't. And there's actually a group policy setting you can configure for your domain to give domain admins full control of roaming profiles, but at this point I can't. And if you wonder, like, what's the v6 on the end, remember that Microsoft's been making operating systems forever. And your roaming profile, since they do contain like operating specific information in there, like registry settings, they're not universal. So a roaming profile created on a Windows 10 system is going to work on another Windows 10 system. So what we have here is this .v6. This tells the Microsoft operating system that when a user logs in and they're sending the client OS to the shared folder to find its roaming profile, if it exists, it's going to look for the username as well as the correct version, v6, v7. I think like some Windows earlier the first version of Windows 10 was .v5, and I think like Windows 7 was, I don't know, v2 or something. I'm not making it up, but we've had different versions for a while. All right. So the next thing, I have a roaming profile. I've talked about the version. Oh, let's go check our client out real quick. All right. So I've logged into my client, and here, let me just scale up my display real quick here. All right. 250. Apply. Oops. All right. 1 second. All right. Why aren't we? Let's see here. All right. Let's log in. And we could actually access that file server from, oops, we could if I type it incorrectly. So there's our shared folder. Now since I'm logged on as employee 1, I can actually see what's in there, and this is like my user profile. If I put some stuff on my desktop, the next time when I log off, it currently hasn't been copied up there yet, but when I log off, and log on again, right now what's happening is the content from my roaming profile my local profile is being copied up to the file server, and when I log in, it'll get copied back down again. All right, let's see here. All right, there's the content on my desktop. So that's it. And don't forget that it's a hidden file, but there's actually a file for the registry as well that's stored in here. All right. Okay, let's see where we're at with this. Oh, so far I've made a roaming profile for employee 1. If I wanted to, lines 37 and 38. It's actually, again, this would all fit on one line. I just split it up. What's happening here is line 37, if I just ran one line at a time, this returns every user object that's in the employee's OU. And then for each one of those user objects, I'm piping it. I'm piping it to the set AD user command, which is going to set the user profile path to server 2016-1 profiles %username%. So now all 20 of my users that I created, actually all the users in that employee's OU now have roaming profiles set up with them. And I can probably show you two things real quick as just an add-on to this. One is access-based enumeration, and actually, I guess really just access-based enumeration we can talk about. Let's go back to the client. Let's sign on as employee 2. So I'll just sign on and sign off again. Sign out. Employee 2. Since that scaling is only a part of the employee 1 profile, I'm going to have the issue with this super small font again. I'm just going to log on, we're going to log off, and then what I'm going to show you is that employee 1 can actually see all of the profiles that exist on our file server, which some people might say is a security issue. So we'll just give it a second here. Okay, let's sign out. So at this point what's happening is the employee 2 profile is being uploaded from the client to our file server. And let's log on as employee 1 because I don't want to change the font size. You know you're getting old when you like your old laptop more. This Retina display is awesome, I suppose, but it doesn't really help with virtual machines too much. But okay. Let's go to our shared folder again. And you're like, oh, this is kind of crazy. So I'm logged on as employee 1, but I can see other people's profiles. Now I can't get into them. The NTFS permissions are set so that you can't access them. And if we took a look at what the operating system did when the profile was created, I mean, what it did here again is employee 1 has full control and the operating system has full control, and that's it. Nobody else has access. So what do we do? Let me just sign out here. And let's go to our domain controller. I can enable this thing called access-based enumeration. And what that basically says is, let's look at here's our profile share, properties, settings here. So what's happening here is unless I have the ability to read a subfolder, if I don't have the ability to read a subfolder, I won't see it. So I've enabled access-based enumeration on our profiles directory. And now I go back to our client. And let's re-access. There we go. Let's log in. And let's go back and let's take a look at that roaming profile one more time. I should say the roaming profile folder. So access-based enumeration is on, and now I can only see the folders that I have read access to. I can't see other ones. And maybe one more thing in closing is probably what I should have done is when I set up the shared folder on my computer here, properties, and sharing. I shared it just as profiles. I should have shared it as dollar profiles, to put a dollar sign out front. That would have made it a hidden share, and hidden shares are even a little more secure, because when you're back on your client and you're accessing, where you're poking around in the network like you shouldn't be, but people do, I suppose, sometimes. If it's a hidden share, you wouldn't even see this. You'd actually have to put in like, dollar, it might be, maybe at the dollar sign, it might be, it's actually, like, for example, the C drive a lot of times is shared by default. Yeah. So I should have shared it as profiles with a dollar sign on the end to make it a hidden share. And what I illustrated to you is that our domain controller actually has its C drive by default shared, so you can access it, and I would just have to put in the credentials of someone that can access my C drive. I think administrator can do that. I'm kind of shooting from the hip on this one. Yeah, there you go. So now I am poking around on the C drive of my domain controller. So the C drive is a hidden share. And maybe one more thing I could show you. I keep saying one more thing. This is really it. Is I've logged on as a couple users onto this machine here. So if I look under the users profile in the users directory, we can see that there are 1, 2, 3 currently 4 local profiles that are stored on this machine. And we know that employee 1, employee 2 are part of a roaming profile. So when you log on as employee 1 or employee 2, there's a synchronization that goes on between the file server and this client here. There's another way in Windows 10 for displaying all your profiles that are stored on the machine, and that would also display, that would actually show which ones are local and which ones are roaming. And I've kind of forgotten how to get there. So maybe I should just call it quits now, and that can be up to you to find. Thanks for taking the time to watch the screencast. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. If you'd like to get a copy of the script that I used to set up roaming profiles in this environment, I would be glad to share it with you. Just shoot me an email, and I will send you a copy of the script here. Again, thanks for watching this, and have a great day.